Hello, and welcome to this lecture on Adobe Illustrator by Eduonix Technologies. In this lecture, we're going to be making a design, this in the following video. In this video, we're going to focus on the layout part, and the next we're going to focus on the graphics. So, I have a document up right now that I don't want. We want to start from scratch. I've made some specs for this design, so feel free to do whatever you want, but keep in mind what's needed for print versus web, and that kind of thing when setting it up. So it's just double or a single fold 8.5 by 11 pamphlet, front and back. So I'm going to select two artboards. And when I say feel free to do whatever you want, I'm talking mainly about, design image choices. You don't want to find the same images I'm using, perhaps. So back to the document setup. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set this to inches. And I'm going to use raster effects in color mode to determine the resolution. Now this is, it really doesn't do anything different than setting this to pixels, but instead of doing the calculation, figure out how many pixels an 8.5 by 11 piece page is going to be. But with this resolution, you can just set it to inches and set this to high resolution. In fact, with printers today, I like to go a little bit higher sometimes. So when it gives you the pixels, you can increase that to twice as big easily with the canvas size. Change all the elements accordingly. But for just right now, let's just select this. We're going to have two artboards. Make the spacing whatever you feel comfortable with. Some you might want to put them right next to each other, but you want to account for bleed. So typical bleed being 1/8 of an inch, 0.0125, or 0.125 inches. You might want it to be 0.25, and they give you like a little bit extra here. So it's set to bleed being a standard 0.125, and that's what I'm going to put for the bleed. Since I have this lock button activated, it puts it on all of them. And I'm going to change the orientation here so that its width is 11, because the fold's going to be in the middle. It's going to cut it into 5.5 by 8.5 rectangles. So with all that together, I might as well call this, give it a name. And really the correct term is single fold, but it doesn't really matter. It's just the terminology you'll hear. Obviously the align objects to pixel grid option is not necessary since this isn't going to be pixel based. Now we have two artboards, and whichever one we have clicked on or selected artwork on or are working on generally will be selected. But this is important to know when you're exporting things or when you're pasting, particularly because you paste things relative to the artboards. And I'll show you this by setting up the main area for, let's say there's a border. I'm just going to set my rulers to 8.5 by, or 5.5, 5.25. It's 5.5. As you can see, I snapped into 5.5 there. Although you can't tell if you're snapping if you're too far away. If you move in closer, you can see it moving in little increments, and that's snapping. So right now, let's say I have a lot of text on the back page, and a lot of images, descriptions on the front. So So that's kind of going to be the requirements. So notice I have this artboard selected. It's black. It's really thin, hard to see, but if I zoom into the corner, you can see the difference. Actually, it's the same thickness no matter what you zoom in. It's just to tell you that you're on that artboard. Since I'm on it, I hit Control Cut, and then I clicked on this one to select it. And if I do Control F, paste in front, it'll put it in the exact same space. And keep that in mind, it's really useful in reordering your pages and also sharing elements that you want in the same exact position on different pages. Control Alt semicolon makes the guide selectable, and I can copy it to the same position. I could have just created a new one, but with that last trick, I can just select it, Control C, and Control F, put it in the exact same spot. Once again, the usefulness of working with multiple artboards is pretty unparalleled. In fact, if you're doing just one document, it's often a good idea to work with multiple artboards. The reason you want two artboards, generally, even if you just have one document, is so, let's say I don't want these squares here, and I did a bunch of setup just to speed things up. If I copy, or if I cut them, but I might want them later, let's say, I want to paste them into this one, they'll be in the exact same position for when I want them later. So anyway, I set this up with these little squares, which are really rectangles because I want a little bit less margins on the left and right. That's just me. We're actually going to want some margins in the middle too, but we can just set up something a little bit later, or we can just go off the 5 and 6 over here, and 16 and a half and 17 and a half over here. So the requirements are that it's going to have 3 images, and this is going to be the inside spread, and this is going to be the front cover. We can change the artboard order later. You can change it yourself, but it doesn't really matter. We're just going to print these out individually per size. So it's always a good idea to set up the printer to print how we've designed the document, because if you're doing a multi-spread, multi-page document, if it has 4 pages, inside pages, these aren't going to be as evenly numbered. This is going to be 1, and this is going to be the last page. And then the page on top of that, if it's saddle stitched, of course, it's going to be 2 on this side, and then it would be 3. But this would be 1 and 4, and because when you stitch it, the pages need to be numbered like that. But we're not going to actually do it that way. But since this is just single side, one piece of paper, I've opted to just do 2 pages on 1 sheet. Anyway, if you're doing multiple pages, you should make 5.5 by 8.5 artboards, and 4 of them. And then just have a whole big one for a cover. Anyway, back to this. 3 images, and people read in a Z shape, and it's not exact Z, it's just a scan. You kind of just scan over the page. They tend to lock on images longer. So there's a lot of things to keep in mind when you're designing something. And in case you're wondering, I put all of the squares and guides onto this guides layer and lock. Keeps things really simple and clean. Although you can hide guides with just a shortcut. I have some other things that might end up going on the guides layer later. So now that we have our spaces for our images to go, we're going to hold them all down and Control Shift Alt, or all the buttons, basically Mac or Windows, all of them out. And then since they're all selected and they're not grouped, we're going to go to Transform Each, because we're making space for the type right now. I want to turn on Preview because we're going to be doing this visually for the most part. And if anybody's ever told you that exact measurements are always, 100% required for graphic design, it's not true. There's margins are the most important, but I'm going to set this orientation to the left here so they go in from margins are important, but it's really just important that it looks good. When I said margins are important, I mean that's the most important thing. Now, this would be right on the fold, and you don't want that, because that's where the stitching is going to go. And also, when you're opening the book, this is going to be bent inward. So generally, you want to give it about twice as much as you have allowed for margins on the right. And now margins and bleed, by the way, are different. This bleed isn't actually going to print, but in case it does, in case it's off by just a little bit, we want to have, if we have artwork that comes to the edges, we want to have it go into the bleed, just in case they cut it wrong. So anyway, that's the purpose for that. So yeah, I've just visually gone by what's in the center. You can measure it out if you want. Normally, if I'm doing a job, I'll measure it out. But so we have a space for our type, space for our images, and I'll show you why we just don't plop them in there. And here's space for our header. Also, there's going to be some more type. It's going to go down here. Now, crossing the fold is something that's perfectly okay to do, but because of what we have, we're going to do it with the type, but because of what we have, it just fits nicely onto 2 pages. You know, if you're doing something about just one thing, go outside of everything, just aside from the artboards, and just make it big and, you know, cross the lines. The more you can cross the lines, the more pleasing it is for the viewer. I've done this so that they get a lot of images on the way down as they're scanning, or they can scan directly down and go to the right, because there's going to be a little part for information here. And I'm going to set up the first one, and then I'm just going to do the other ones myself. And this is going to be a header. It's going to be like a combination of an image, kind of something that we're going to make. But you see with the type tool, just click on it, and you'll get the circle if you're holding it near the inside of the shape. So you want to click it with the circle up. And I'm just going to start typing. That's all you need for right now. That's all I'm going to do. I'm just going to insert this with filler text. So I'm going to do that to all of these. And then I'm going to get a couple pictures and some graphic elements. And so we got all the main type in and everything. And I have images. I'm about to put them in a second. But I wanted to show you all these. You can get these charts from Free Web Graphics. I think it's the name. It's actually freewebelements.com. All zip files, and they're themed, and they come in a lot of different styles. But I'm just going to be using some like from here, or I could use some from here on the inside. But this is going to be really cut and dry. But if you're doing a design in general, these are more for info charts, but they have everything for like design as well. And even if you did take this, you could use it to build color schemes. You could use certain shapes. Like if you needed some things for charts, like all of these go together pretty well, and they have them by theme, so it's something to go into. We're not going to really focus on that too much. So through magic, I found all these images, and I'm going to be using like this as a texture. This is going to be the company's image right here. That's their building, and they're going to want that like the cover, I suppose. And I put in like headings and everything, and we're going to go into assembling all this, all of our information. But you want to gather as much as you can and have it all available to you at your fingertips before you start out, and after you've done the layout. You know, you want to have it there from the beginning, generally. But since we're making this up as we go along, I just did it like this. But normally, you know, put your images in there from the beginning so you have a good idea. And you can put them in if you can, but I like setting it up like this first. So we'll get into the actual different stage, the next stage of the design in the next video. So thanks for watching.